I still remember the smell that day. Dry spring air, warm wind blowing up from Mexico, and that sweet hint of lilac, the kind our neighbor had planted all along her fence. I was standing on the porch, beer in hand, watching Matt's dog dig furiously under a tree, probably trying to unearth the same damn bone he buried back in January. Everything seemed normal. Life was moving along. 2 hours later, my whole world went out the window. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Jacob, Jake to my friends. I'm 39 years old, born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. I've lived my whole life in the Midwest, where cornfields stretch forever, the wind never quite stops, and your neighbors always know who's sleeping with who. In high school, I played football. Later, I got my engineering degree and started working for a local construction firm. These days, I'm a senior project designer at Midwest Frame and Steel. If someone's building a hangar, a barn, or even a gym in this part of the state, chances are, I've got my hands in the blueprint. My life wasn't anything special. Not flashy. I was the kind of guy who worked hard, fixed his own mower, grilled on weekends, and just wanted his wife to smile at him in the morning, not at her phone. Boring, maybe. But to me, that was everything. I met Carly in 2012. She worked at a local coffee shop called Beanie's, where I'd stop every morning on the way to the site. One day, she got my order wrong, gave me a latte instead of my usual cappuccino. To make up for it, she drew a little heart in the foam and winked. Funny thing is, I thought right then, man, I wish she'd wink at me like that when I wake up. 2 months later, I already knew her dog's name, her younger sister's birthday, and that she couldn't stand people who chew with their mouths open. 6 months after that, we moved in together. A year later, we got married. It was a small wedding, just over 40 people. Nothing fancy. We held it in her uncle's barn, with country music and the smell of apple pie in the air. The first few years were pretty damn great. We didn't have kids, Carly said it wasn't time yet, and I didn't push it. We traveled a lot, mostly around the states, Colorado, Idaho, Texas. Carly ran a blog about small-town America, posted photos of vintage motels, neon signs, and old-school diners. She had an eye. A sense of style. Eventually, she stopped working altogether. Said she wanted to focus on her art. I didn't argue, my paycheck covered us fine. By then, we had a house on the south edge of Omaha, big lot, wide porch, view of the cornfields. I worked. A lot. 12-hour days, sometimes weekends. I just wanted to pay off the mortgage faster. She stayed home. Took pictures. Went on creative retreats for 3 or 4 days at a time. At first, I thought it was sweet. Everyone's got their rhythm, right? But then, I started to feel it. That something was off. It didn't hit all at once. It was more like a draft in a sealed house, subtle, but enough to raise the hair on your arms. She looked me in the eye less. Hugged me less. Laughed at my jokes like it hurt. And when I'd walk into the room and see her quickly flip her phone face down, I acted like I didn't notice. Because sometimes it's easier to live in a lie than to face the truth. Then came that day. Friday. April 26th. I was supposed to head out with the crew to a job site in Lincoln, but something got pushed, the steel delivery was delayed. Boss told me, take the day, Jake. You've been busting your back long enough. I thanked him, figured I'd surprise Carly. Pick up her favorite donuts from Joe's Bakery, grab flowers, throw on some Willie Nelson vinyl, maybe spend the day like old times. I pulled up to the house around 10. Her car was in the drive. Everything looked normal. Quiet. Too quiet. I walked up the steps. Donut box in one hand. Heart beating like crazy, though I couldn't say why. The moment I opened the front door, I heard something. Low. Muffled. A moan. I froze. Thought maybe I was imagining things. Then it came again, clearer this time. A laugh. Male. And that was it. I knew. I don't remember walking down the hall. I remember the donut box falling from my hand, the raspberry one landing on my boot like blood. I remember the door to our bedroom, cracked open just enough. They didn't hear me. But I saw everything. Carly, my wife, laughing, arching, clutching someone's neck. Wearing only my black robe, the one she always wore after a shower. And him, completely bare. And that him was someone I recognized. Trevor. A friend of my cousin's. I'd seen him plenty, barbecues, football nights. The guy I once lent my truck to when his broke down so he could help his sister move. I remember Carly saying, "He's kinda weird but sweet." There he was. Real sweet. I don't know how long I stood there. A second? An hour? Then the door creaked. Carly turned. And what I saw in her eyes wasn't fear. Wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. Like I'd interrupted her. Like I didn't belong. "Jake. What are you doing home?" she asked, not even covering up. Trevor scrambled. Tried to find his jeans. I stood. Numb. Frozen. I didn't yell. Didn't swing. Didn't throw punches. I just said. "I thought we'd have breakfast today." Then I walked out. Outside, the wind had turned colder. Matt's dog had stopped digging. The lilac smelled stronger, almost sickly sweet. I got in the truck and drove. Nowhere in particular. Just, away. Away from everything. I don't know how many hours I spent driving. I just wandered, aimlessly. Turning wherever instinct took me, like the wheel had a mind of its own. Sometimes I'd catch myself passing familiar places, the high school I went to, the abandoned car lot where I bought my first Chevy. I stopped at a rundown gas station once, grabbed a bottle of water and some gum, just to do something with my hands. It didn't help. Inside, I was shredded. But outside, I was calm. That was the scariest part. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was just drifting through a world where everything I knew suddenly meant nothing. Toward evening, I drove to my brother Sam's place. He lived about 30 minutes from us, out by the woods. Sam's 2 years younger, always closer to Mom, always the quiet, thoughtful one. But somehow, he was the only person I could imagine calling in that moment. He opened the door barefoot, holding a cup of coffee, wearing one of those worn-out home t-shirts, looking like he'd just woken up even though it was almost dark. "Jake?" He blinked, surprised, but didn't ask anything stupid. He stepped aside and let me in. I walked past him, sat on the couch, stared out the window. 10 minutes went by. Maybe more. He didn't say a word. Finally, I spoke. "She's with Trevor," I said quietly. Sam frowned. "Which Trevor?" "That one. The guy who helped us fix the grill last year. Tall, crooked teeth, always wears a cap." "Oh, man," Sam exhaled. "You sure?" I nodded. Walked in. Thought I'd surprise her. Turns out, the surprise was on me. Silence. And again, no hysterics. No drama. I just said it like reading a news headline. But every word felt like glass in my throat. "What did she say?" Sam leaned forward. "What are you doing here?" I said with a bitter laugh. Like I wasn't supposed to be in my own damn house. Sam swore softly. Then again. He didn't curse often, but right now, I could tell he was holding back a lot more than words. "So what now? Where you gonna go?" I shrugged. No idea. Don't want to go back. Not now. He nodded. Stay here. As long as you need. So I did. I crashed on his fold-out couch in the spare room, surrounded by old books and dusty boxes of his kids' toys. I barely slept that first night. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out where exactly everything went wrong. The next morning, Carly texted me. 10:16 a.m., Carly, we need to talk. Please. I didn't reply. Half an hour later, another message. 10:45 a.m., Carly, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I can explain. Please just hear me out. Then came the calls. One after another. I didn't pick up. Not because I wanted to play games. I just didn't know what I'd say. Every sentence that came to mind sounded fake. I'd never been one to explode. My whole life I'd prided myself on keeping it together, even when something inside was burning. On the third day, she showed up. I heard her tires crunching on the gravel out front. Looked out the window, her gray Toyota, parked the same sloppy way she always did. She stepped out slowly, wearing her windbreaker, the one she usually threw on for quick grocery runs. Her eyes were swollen, from crying or not sleeping, I didn't know. I walked out onto the porch. Not because I wanted to talk. I just didn't want Sam getting dragged into it. Jake, her voice trembled. I don't know where to begin. I didn't say anything. It wasn't planned. I mean, she hesitated, realizing how stupid that sounded. I didn't mean to hurt you. You were always working. I felt alone. Empty. I'm not trying to justify it, I got lost. And found yourself in bed with Trevor? I asked quietly. She covered her face with her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. You didn't deserve this. You're a good man. Stop, I raised my hand. Just, don't. We stood there in silence. She looked at me, and I saw something strange in her eyes. Not fear. Not guilt. Pity. That's the one thing you never want from someone who's broken you. Pity. Like they shattered you and it's too bad, but hey, moving on. Should I leave? She asked softly. It's not your home anymore, Carly. I turned and went inside. Later, Sam told me she sat in the car for nearly an hour before driving off. I never came out. I just stayed in the kitchen, drinking black coffee and trying not to think. And when I did think, it wasn't about her. It was about me. Who was I now? A husband? A ghost? Just another guy who got played while he worked his fingers to the bone? There was a whole process ahead, sorting stuff, dividing things, maybe divorce. But that would come later. For now, I was just living inside the silence that said more than any words ever could. A week passed. In that time, I became a ghost. I ate because I had to. Slept when I passed out from exhaustion. Worked, because work was the only place where things made sense. On a construction site, everything's logical, every beam has a purpose, every line on the blueprint means something. There's no room for, it just happened, or, I got lost. Things either hold, or fall. Carly stopped calling. No more texts. No more, we need to talk, no, how are you? As if her guilt expired the moment I didn't fall apart the way she expected me to. I didn't beg. Didn't chase her. Didn't scream. And somehow, that probably hurt her more than anything. Sam suggested we go fishing, clear my head. I said no. The guys at work started to glance at me differently. Word had gotten around, maybe. Some knew. Some guessed. I could feel it in the way they went quiet when I walked in. One of the welders, Jeremy, slapped my shoulder one morning and said, If you need to smash a couple of boards, I got an old bat in my garage. I smirked. I didn't need to smash anything. I needed to understand how I lived with someone for so long and didn't see the cracks forming until the whole wall caved in. Then, one evening, while I was sorting tools in Sam's garage, my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't want to answer. But I did. Is this Jake? A woman's voice. Confident. Yeah. This is Ashley. Carly's friend. We met once or twice, at her birthday, maybe you remember. I did. Blonde, with a sparrow tattoo near her collarbone. Talkative. Always looked at me with this quiet suspicion, like she knew something I didn't. Sorry to butt in. But I can't keep my mouth shut anymore, she said, blunt. I think you should know. Know what? It wasn't just Trevor, Jake. There were others. Before him. My stomach clenched. How many? I don't know. One guy was last summer. She said she was going to New Mexico for some photography thing. Met him there. Then someone else from Instagram. I didn't ask for details. I even called her out on it once, told her it wasn't fair to you. Why didn't you tell me back then? Because it wasn't my business. But now that it's all blown up, I just felt sick staying quiet. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding. The world, already cracked, started splintering again. This wasn't a slip-up. This wasn't weakness. This was a pattern. A strategy. A choice. Thanks, I finally said. She hung up. I just sat there on the cold garage floor, my back against the wall, hands shaking like I was coming down from something. Like every ounce of oxygen had been sucked from the room. Because cheating is one thing. But calculated betrayal, again and again, wrapped in love and smiles, that's something else. That Saturday, I finally went back to our house. Or, what used to be, ours. I knew Carly wasn't there, her car had been at her parents' place for over a week. Mrs. Rose, the neighbor, confirmed it the moment I stepped out of the truck. Oh Jake, good to see you, hon, you okay? Not really, I replied. She nodded. People in the suburbs don't need details. They just know. The door opened with its usual creak. Inside, everything was still in place, the furniture, the photos, that ugly plaid blanket we got at a Colorado fair. But the air smelled different. Synthetic. Like a hotel room someone had just checked out of. I wandered through the house. Walked into the bedroom. Sat on the edge of the bed. And for the first time, I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like something inside me had finally been allowed to spill. Not for her. For me. For all the years I thought I wasn't alone, when I actually was. Eventually, I got up. Went to the storage closet. Pulled out old boxes. Started packing up her things, makeup, books, notebooks full of inspirational quotes. One of them was still on the fridge, "Be where your feet are." Funny. Her feet, it turned out, were never in this home. By noon, everything of hers was boxed up. I stacked the boxes by the front door and sent her a text. Your stuff is by the door. Come by when I'm not here. She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. That night, I checked into the Sunset Motel off Highway 92. The same place Carly and I stayed during a road trip to Denver. I sat outside on a plastic chair, sipping cheap whiskey, listening to country music through the thin motel walls. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not joy. Not closure. But numbness that didn't hurt. And in that moment, that was enough. Life's funny. When you get betrayed, pain isn't the first thing that hits. First comes shock. Then rage. Then, nothing. Just a dead quiet inside, like everything that could hurt already burned itself out, and what's left is ash. That's how I lived at the motel. Set my alarm for 6:30, even if I didn't have to be up. Shaved. Put on a clean shirt. Went to work. At night, I'd stare at the wall or scribble thoughts in a notebook, just to get them out of my head. Sam called, asked how I was doing. I told him, fine. Lied, of course. But he had a wife, a kid, a job. I wasn't gonna dump this mess on him. A couple of weeks later, Carly came and picked up the boxes. No fight. No scene. No note. Just showed up while I was at work and took everything. Even her favorite mug, the one that said, Creative Juice, the one she used every morning in my robe. That mug felt more like her than she did. I filed for divorce myself. Not out of pride. Out of necessity. I couldn't stay stuck in limbo, like a fly caught in amber. The paperwork was fast, uncontested. We barely spoke. Everything went through lawyers. Clinical. Cold. Efficient. The day I signed the final papers, something in my chest clicked, like a lock turning forever. A couple weeks after that, Trevor messaged me. Yeah. That Trevor. Just one line. 6:04 p.m., Trevor, we need to talk. I don't want things to stay like this. My mouth went dry. I stared at the message like it was a spider slowly dropping from the ceiling, not sure if I should smash it or let it crawl away. I didn't respond right away. Slept on it. Then agreed to meet. We picked a local bar, Rusty Buckle, the kind of place where you know every face in the room. Too public to get ugly. Maybe that's why he chose it. So I wouldn't break his nose between the fried pickles and the jukebox. He was already sitting at a booth when I walked in. No cap this time. Face pale, tired. He stood up like he wanted to shake my hand, maybe even hug me. Thought better of it. Jake, he started as I sat down. Talk, I cut him off. Get to the point. He swallowed hard. Eyes fixed on the table. I don't know where to begin. Start with why you were screwing the wife of the guy who lent you his truck. He flinched. Hard. His eyes jumped to mine. It was a mistake. I didn't look for it. We were just talking, texting. Then she invited me over while you were gone. I didn't plan it. Morals only apply to other people, huh? I was drunk. It happened once. Then again. I didn't know how to stop. I breathed in, slow and deep. Let it ring in my skull. Why are you here, Trevor? Because I feel like garbage. I can't sleep. Can't look at myself in the mirror. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Sorry, I repeated. He nodded, eyes rimmed red. He looked genuinely ashamed. But you know what? Too late. Some lines, once crossed, don't lead back. I leaned in. I don't care how you feel. I don't care if you're sorry. You thought saying this would erase it? It doesn't. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm not gonna stalk you or blow up your car. But you're done. You don't exist to me anymore. Got it? He nodded. Again. I stood up, left him sitting there with his half-finished beer and all his useless regret. Another 2 months passed. I sold the house. Couldn't stand to live in it anymore. Every wall was a reminder. Every corner a landmine. Moved into a small townhouse closer to downtown, closer to noise, to people, to anything alive. I needed motion. Needed distraction. Work stayed steady. Slower than before, but steady. Sometimes I took jobs in other states, Iowa, Kansas, South Dakota. It was easier on the road. Easier to think. Easier not to think. Sam and his wife invited me for Thanksgiving. Big family dinner. And that's where I met Catherine, Sam's cousin on his wife's side. We'd never really talked. Quiet. Thoughtful. Eyes like she carried her own share of broken things. We started chatting. Nothing flirty. Just two people who were tired in the same way. Later, she asked me, "Do you still think about her?" I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her hands. The way she held her cocoa with both palms, like it was something sacred. "Not the way I used to," I finally said. "Now I mostly think about myself. About how I didn't see it coming. About how I ever trusted that hard." She nodded. Gently. "It's not about seeing. It's about honesty. You can be blind and safe, if someone tells you the truth. But if you've got perfect vision and someone lies to your face, you'll still fall." That was the first time I truly felt like I might be okay. Not fixed. Not healed. But, human again. Almost a year had passed. Funny how fast you learn to live with what once felt like the end. People say time heals. That's a lie. Time doesn't heal, it just wears down the sharp edges. Leaves scars you learn to live with, like a rough patch on your skin you only notice when you run your fingers over it. I still thought about Carly sometimes. Not with rage. Not with pain. More like, remembering someone you used to know. Like a book you once read, one that still sits on the shelf, even if you'll never open it again. Catherine and I were still seeing each other. Not exactly a relationship. Not exactly casual. More like, comfort. A quiet companionship. A connection between two people who'd been through different kinds of fire and didn't want to burn each other. She knew about Carly. About Trevor. About everything. "You know what scares me the most?" I told her once. "It's not falling in love again. It's not seeing the signs, again. Missing it. That's not about your eyes, Jake," she said. "It's about honesty. If someone lies to you long enough, it doesn't matter how clear the signs are." I didn't say anything at the time. But something about that stuck with me. She didn't push. Didn't dig. She was just there. And sometimes that's all a person needs, someone who doesn't ask you to be over it. Just someone who lets you be. The divorce was finalized October 17th. I got the envelope in the mail. Plain, gray. Cold. One line that said, "Marriage dissolved by mutual consent." Mutual. What a joke. Like I ever agreed to be blindsided in my own home. But I didn't rip it up. Didn't burn it like they do in movies. I just put it in a drawer. Closed it. And left it there. A few weeks later, I ran into Carly. At the grocery store, of all places. I was picking up wine and snacks. Turned the corner, and there she was. Standing by the chocolate shelf, in the same jacket she wore when we went to Yellowstone. Her hair was shorter now. Her face thinner. Her eyes, different. We locked eyes. She froze. And I felt nothing. Not anger. Not grief. Not even a lump in my throat. Just a little tension in my back. Like seeing an old classmate you once fought with. "Jake," she breathed. I nodded. Politely. Already halfway past her when she stepped toward me. "You look good." "So do you," I replied. Automatically. Without meaning. "I heard you moved." "Anne." "I'm alive, Carly." "That's enough for now," I cut in, calm. Flat. She nodded. Her eyes welled up a bit, maybe with guilt, maybe just memory. Hard to tell. "I'm sorry it ended like that," she said. I looked at her. And I realized something. This wasn't the woman I married. That version of her was gone. This was a stranger. Tired. Hollowed out. Maybe sorry. Maybe not. I didn't wish her harm. But I didn't wish her well, either. "Take care, Carly." And I walked away. Didn't look back. That evening, I was at Catherine's. She was cutting oranges for mulled wine. The stove hissed, the air smelled like cloves and cinnamon, and old James Taylor played in the background. And I realized something. I wasn't thinking about the past to survive anymore. I was thinking about the future. Because for the first time in a long time, it felt possible again. She turned, smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "How good it feels to just sit here. Without wondering if someone's lying to me." She laughed softly. "Not the most romantic line I've ever heard," she said. "But I'll take it." And we both smiled. And in that moment, for the first time in over a year, I felt light. Not happy. But light. I never considered myself a strong man. Not in the lift heavy, punch walls, never cry kind of way. My strength was different, endurance. Calm under pressure. The ability to keep myself together, even when everything inside was cracking. That trait, more than anything, got me through what Carly did. I didn't burn the house down. I didn't lose myself in a bottle. I didn't become bitter. I just kept walking. One step at a time. It had been a year and 3 months. Spring came back, just like before. Sudden. Sharp. The same way it had come the day everything fell apart. And something inside me told me, it's time to finish this. Not for her. For me. That morning, I woke up early. Shaved. Put on my nicest shirt, the navy blue one I always saved for important things. No real reason. I just wanted to look composed. Settled. Put together. I straightened up the front walk of my townhouse. Took care of some mail. Ran my truck through the car wash. Everything felt still. Quiet. Like a long exhale. Then I drove out to the cemetery. Where my mom is buried. Where my dad's name is already etched beside hers on a stone, at his request. He's still alive, but years ago he'd said, might as well be ready. Classic him, a joke with a pinch of truth. It's a peaceful place. Just off a hill, with trees that move like they know secrets. And a field behind it that always looks golden in the spring light. I brought flowers. Not roses, she hated roses. I brought wildflowers, cornflowers, little white daisies. The kind she used to pick off the side of the road when we were kids. I stood there for a while. Said nothing at first. Then quietly, I said. You'd be disappointed. Or maybe not. You always knew I lead with my heart. Even when it's stupid. I don't believe the dead hear us. But talking to them still matters. Sometimes we just need someone who won't interrupt. I sat on the bench near the headstone. Let the wind hit my face. Watched 2 birds land near the path. And then I realized, I'd finally forgiven Carly. Not because she deserved it. But because I was tired of being tied to her, even through anger. Letting go isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a quiet decision you make on a Thursday morning at a cemetery. A few days later, I drove back to the town I grew up in. One of my oldest friends still lived there, Jonathan. Johnny, we called him in high school. We hadn't spoken in nearly 10 years, but out of the blue, he called me and said, "If you're still alive, come visit. If you're dead, tell me where to leave flowers." We always joked like that. Especially when life hurt. He was one of the only people I could talk to without explaining the backstory. We sat on his porch, drinking cheap beer, watching his kid ride his bike in circles in the yard. I told him everything. From the donuts on the floor to the motel nights to Catherine's quiet strength. He didn't interrupt. Just nodded. Listened. Then said. You made it because you let yourself fall apart. Most guys try to act tough and stay broken forever. You shattered, man. But you put the pieces back together. I didn't know what to say. What now? He asked. I looked at the sky. The light. The kid on the bike. I don't know. I think, just live. No plans. No fear. Just live. He smirked. You sound like a Buddhist monk holding a Bud Light. Better than a maniac with a sledgehammer, I replied. When I got home, Catherine was in the kitchen, sorting through old books. She was covered in dust, wearing leggings and a messy bun, smiling to herself as she flipped through some old paperback. She looked up when I came in. Her smile didn't change. But I think she saw something in me had shifted. Where'd you go? She asked. The past, I said. But I came back. She walked over and hugged me. Just like that. No words. No drama. I thought about your offer, she whispered. To move. To Colorado. Start fresh. Yeah. Yeah. Not as an escape. Not to run. But because I want a new route. With you. I felt something warm and unfamiliar rise in my chest. Something close to relief. You serious? She nodded. You? Down to the bone. A month later, we left. No big goodbye. No social media announcements. No drawn-out explanations. Just two people who closed the door, returned the keys, took what mattered, and left for a place where no one knew our names. We weren't running. We were rebuilding. Sometimes I still dream about those days. I wake up and for a second I feel her, Carly, like she's right there on the edge of the bed. But then I roll over. And Catherine's there. With her little frown lines. With her soft breathing. With a presence that doesn't need proving. And I realize. Life doesn't give you second chances. It just shows you who you are after the first one breaks you. I never thought of myself as the hero of anything. Not a tragic figure. Not a survivor. Just a man who once stood in the middle of his life and watched it collapse. And didn't run. Didn't scream. Just stayed there. And waited for the dust to settle. It had been a full year and some change. Colorado air was thinner, cleaner. You feel every breath up there. Every heartbeat. Every step up a hill becomes deliberate, like your body's asking, are you sure you want to keep going? And my answer was always. Yes. We live just outside Fort Collins. A quiet townhouse. Big enough to breathe, small enough to feel safe. I worked part-time for a local building firm. Catherine was doing design projects remotely, but mostly, we just lived. Slowly. Intentionally. There was no healing ceremony, no magical transformation. Just days. Strung together. One after another. And in that rhythm, the pain finally lost its teeth. One chilly April morning, I woke up early. Stepped out onto the little back porch. Mug of black coffee in hand. No wind. Just morning mist and the sound of a train in the distance. And I thought, this is what peace looks like. Not excitement. Not passion. Just the absence of dread. Catherine came out a few minutes later, wrapped in a blanket, still half asleep. You're up early. Didn't sleep much. Dreamed about the old house. She looked at me carefully. Not worried. Just present. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. I think I'm finally done with it. We sat there, listening to birds wake up. And I realized something I'd never put into words before. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. One day, I got a final message from Trevor. Short. Honest. 1:11 p.m., Trevor. Moving out of state. Leaving it all behind. Hope you found your peace. I'm still looking. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. Just because I had nothing left to say. His road was his own. Mine had moved on. A few nights later, Catherine and I took a walk through the neighborhood. Quiet streets, porch lights glowing, faint smell of someone grilling something in the distance. A dog barked 3 houses down. She slipped her hand into mine. Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? She asked. I took a deep breath. Thought about it. Sometimes. But then I think, if it hadn't, I might still be there. Sleeping beside someone who was never really with me. Believing a lie. Building a life around silence. She nodded. You still love her? No. I love who I thought she was. And maybe that's worse. Another long pause. Then I looked at her and said. But I don't hate her anymore. That part of me's gone. She squeezed my hand. That's how I know you're not broken anymore. And I smiled. Because I knew she was right. I don't tell this story because I want sympathy. I tell it because there's probably someone out there right now, driving around with a box of donuts in their passenger seat, thinking about surprising someone they love. And they're about to walk in on the moment that changes their life forever. To that person, if you're out there, I'll say this. You will survive. It won't be fast. It won't be clean. But you will make it through. You'll stop blaming yourself. You'll stop wondering what you missed. You'll stop trying to fix what never wanted to be whole. And one day, maybe not soon, but someday, you'll wake up in a place that smells nothing like betrayal. You'll hear laughter that doesn't sound forced. You'll sit beside someone who doesn't make you guess how they feel. And you'll realize. You're not scared anymore. Not of love. Not of truth. Not of being alone. Because you walked through the worst, and stayed human. And that's enough. That's everything.